Sukuna vs Gojo is the pinnacle of power in the jujitsu world. Each of them has a good reason to fight hard in this battle where the rules don't apply. Pro Gojo means being considered the greatest sorcerer who ever lived, as well as eliminating the king of curses and saving his student. Pro Sukuna means a rematch, as well as keeping his new body and maintaining his position as the strongest sorcerer who ever lived. But the question that remains is, are you Team Sukuna or Team Gojo? Comment your team below and let's go for the biggest fight in the jujitsu world. Preparation. Gojo vs Sukuna begins even before Gojo is released from the prison realm. With the back door of the prison realm in a jujitsu school training camp, Kurosohana ends up using Jacob's ladder to free Satoru Gojo. But after the impact of the attack and the smoke throughout the place, we see nothing of the back of the prison kingdom or the presence of Satoru Gojo, which makes everyone wonder if the Gojo was a sinner. If so, that would explain why he disappeared when he was hit by Jacob's ladder, so that could be the end of Gojo. But as they discuss this, they all feel a great earthquake. At another point, Kenjaku tells them that he has placed the prison kingdom being guarded by a curse that works like a sensor, in the deepest place in Japan at 8,000 meters deep and still in a subduction zone. A place where one tectonic plate slides over another, causing earthquakes. At this depth and in the place where he was placed, there is such pressure that the Kenjaku expected the Gojo to be killed the moment he was released, since he knew that the back of the prison kingdom was with the Tengen. But no, the man came out more imposing, handsome and hotter than he normally was. And now he was standing in front of the man who had stolen his friend's body, as he uttered his last words. While the Kenjaku taunts him, the Gojo fights back, telling him to choose his last words carefully as he is on the verge of death. When Gojo finally attacks, a shadow appears in front of him. The impact of these two attacks creates a sphere of energy that throws everything and everyone away. The Kenjaku laughs and looks up to see Gojo facing another sorcerer. When we look from another perspective, we see that the one who managed to oppose the Gojo was none other than Sukuna himself in the body of Megumi, who is already asking if the Gojo remembers his declaration. When I take over this kid's body, you'll be the first one I kill. He says that he has just entered Megumi's body, while Urami jumps in beside him. But then Gojo teases Sukuna for running away with his tail between Itadori's legs when he realized he couldn't control his body. When Urami tries to interfere, she's punched in the stomach just to get her to connect, while Gojo tells her to go fufu. Sukuna, for his part, just dodges while facing Gojo. Kenjaku appears behind Sukuna asking him to keep his promise before fighting the Gojo, while Homie laughs at the fact that Sukuna has become the puppy of a patched-up old man. But Gojo doesn't intend to fight Sukuna now either, he has to do something first, but he only went there to bury his old friend's body. He gets annoyed at how close Kenjaku and Sukuna are, and asks what day it is. When he finds out, he decides that they're going to fight on December 24th, then says that he set that date because a person doesn't need to have 2 death anniversaries. This is rebutted by Kenjaku with a, "Do you think you'll win?" Gojo then remembers Itadori's question about who would win in a full Sukuna vs Gojo battle, and then declares with the greatest confidence in the world, "I will win." After that we have the preparation for both sides until the day set for this fight. Sukuna eats the remaining fingers to restore his full power, except for one finger, which is most likely with Gojo. But that's not relevant, since he can recover all his power by compensating for the strength of that finger by eating his real body, which has been kept like a Buddhist mummy. As for Gojo, we don't know if he really prepared himself physically, because it wasn't shown. But it seems that he found out everything that happened during his time in prison. In the blink of an eye, we arrive at December 24th, the date set for the biggest Jujutsu Kaisen fight to be televised to the entire Jujutsu world. In a building in Shinjuku, Sukuna, Urami and Kenjaku talk about their plan. While Sukuna fights Gojo, Kenjaku intends to kill all the other players in the slaughter game. He knows that if Gojo loses, there is a front line of Jujutsu students who might have a chance to kill Sukuna after the fight. Mainly Yuta, Hikari, and Maki. So he'll finish them all off before then. In another building, the main students are wondering what they should say to Gojo, since before victory was always certain, but now there is uncertainty because their enemy is Sukuna. When Gojo appears with a peak Toji countenance, tension takes over the whole room. The stronger students notice, but Itadori breaks the ice by saying that his cursed technique is ahead. This is enough for the Gojo to change his face and get into the vibe of a real competitor. First the Itadori slaps him on the back as a good luck push, followed by everyone else in a good luck tunnel, so that the Gojo can become the winner of this duel. Everyone says words of support so that the Gojo can win, while he laughs and says, "Go ahead." But on the other side, the King of Curses is also laughing because he knows he's going to have a hard time. The fight begins. On the appointed day, Gojo and the other teachers go to the same building that was the epicenter of the Shibuya incident. The biggest battle in the Jujutsu world will begin at the top of the building. From a building in Shinjuku, Sukuna perceives the cursed energy exuding from the top of the building in Shibuya. He then knows that he doesn't need a place or time for the battle to begin. From the top of the building, Gojo makes his first move. He makes Ijichi climb a barrier so that Sukuna can't see the massive amount of power he's concentrating, so Ijichi gives his all to this barrier because he's the man Gojo trusts the most. Along with the Yutaheim's curse technique, which amplifies the total amount and release of cursed energy within its range. Unlike other sorcerers, she doesn't use the subtraction of elements in her cursed technique. She uses chanting, hand seals, dance and music to increase the effectiveness of her cursed technique by 120%. All this to further amplify the Gojo technique. In this move, challenger and challenged will be decided between the strongest sorcerer in history and the strongest sorcerer of the modern era. Just like the Yutaheim, this time the Gojo didn't subtract any elements from his curse technique. He intoned the chant, the seals, the position, and the music, to achieve a 200% release of his purple void. Because of the Ijichi barrier, the Sukuna was unable to perceive the release of cursed energy until moments before impact. His reaction was limited to stretching out his arms to try to stop the massive attack that consumed everything in front of him. This attack was so powerful that it traveled kilometers from Shibuya to Shinjuku at such an absurd speed that Sukuna couldn't dodge it and it destroyed everything in its path. After the impact, Sukuna emerged from the wreckage almost unscathed, but had to sacrifice his arm. The two strongest sorcerers finally come face to face. But it's Gojo who makes the first move, just to make it clear that the challenger is Sukuna and not him. A taunt that is answered with, "You bastard." After this attack, Sukuna sneers at Gojo because he's so happy after landing a surprise blow. But he adds that the Gojo is nothing more than a little fish on his cutting board. He may be a fresher fish than the others, but he'll still be a little fish with no name. He gets into battle stance and declares that he's going to start by taking the scales off this fresh fish, while cursed energy flows from his fists in the shape of flames. But Gojo responds by asking what he's trying to do with Megumi's face, if he's trying to make him feel sorry for him or something. But unfortunately for Sukuna, Gojo has done some special training. He also gets into a battle stance with liquid energy flowing from his fists, and declares that if he's against Megumi, he doesn't need to hold back since he's the son of Toji. Besides, after Sukuna dies he'll think about what to do to save Megumi, since he didn't die immediately when he went with Itadori. Sukuna starts with a kick but the attack doesn't affect Gojo. He hits back with a punch, which Sukuna parries with his forearm. When Sukuna tries another punch, Gojo dodges it by lying on the ground or floating over it. He then gives Sukuna a greeting like a, "See you later." And he uses the gravitational control of his curse technique to make Sukuna fly with such absurd repulsion that he goes off destroying as many walls as possible until he finally stops. But before he can react, Gojo appears in front of him with his two-legged fist, knocking Sukuna away. We can see that this kick was absurd when Gojo starts running towards Sukuna and we see that his body is so heavy that it sinks into the ground. His weight is such that the viaduct thereon collapses before Gojo gets close to Sukuna. But before the debris touches the ground, Gojo uses his gravitational power and lifts the entire concrete block, causing Sukuna to be trapped by the pressure. He then throws the block towards another building next to it while Sukuna remains pressed against it. But before the block hits the building, Sukuna manages to dodge it and runs towards Gojo. In the air, with the two of them facing each other, Sukuna launches his dismantle. Gojo in turn feels the full pressure of the attack, but it's not aimed at him, but at the building behind him. When Gojo looks back to see the impact of the attack, it opens up a gap for Sukuna's attack, but Gojo still has time to react while part of the severed building falls on top of them. Sukuna's punch begins to stand up to Gojo's unlimited punch, which he realizes and undoes by physically holding Sukuna's fist, and he's even surprised when he sees that he's managed to touch Gojo. Here Sukuna has used his expertise in cursed energy to create a simple domain involving his entire body, called a domain extension. This neutralizes the Gojo's technique, but leaves him unable to use his own innate techniques. The two enter through one of the windows of the collapsed building, and the Sukuna begins to chase the Gojo. Amidst the debris inside the collapsed building, a floating door separates the two, who prepare their blows with cursed energy. The Sukuna with a single fist, and the Gojo using both fists to prepare a concentrated attack on one of them. The moment the building falls, it's the moment of impact of these two absurd attacks. It destroys another building in a large area of destruction. After the impact, the two of them emerge from the resulting smoke as if nothing had happened. The Gojo says he's going to put all this destruction on Sukuna, who responds by asking if he can do it. But it's here that the Gojo remembers that Mei is broadcasting the whole battle. Elsewhere, the strongest sorcerers are watching this clash and giving us answers to everything that is happening. From Sukuna's domain extension made to ignore the unlimited Gojo, to his skill in using the extension to touch the Gojo, and then undoing it to use his innate techniques. But they also mention why they haven't used the domain expansion yet, which would force both of them to use it at the same time and then not be able to use their innate techniques. But they know that the result of this could decide the winner. They hypothesize that Sukuna himself might think that Gojo would win the battle for space, but if that were really true, Gojo himself would have already expanded his domain. Until everyone discovers that Sukuna's domain expansion has no barriers, which means that there wouldn't be a fight for domain space. Many don't believe it and think it's impossible. It would be like holding water without a container. So they come to the conclusion that it wouldn't be a battle between the two domains, but rather a battle between the boundaries of the barrier, or at most, a battle for guaranteed hits. Even though it takes a lot of energy to use a domain expansion, they are still talking about Gojo, a man with almost infinite cursed energy. This is all thanks to his absurd energy efficiency, capable of using less energy than he naturally replenishes. In addition, they both have plenty of cursed energy to use their domain expansions, but have they not done so yet because they don't know the outcome of this battle for space. At this point, Gojo and Sukuna finally expand their domains, which results in a clash between the two. Gojo's expansion ends up closing in on part of Sukuna's expansion. This leaves the two level, meaning that their guaranteed hits cancel each other out. But if there is significant damage and one of the domains collapses, the other will attack with everything. Everyone is amazed to see that the barriers are level only within the Gojo barrier. But as Sukuna's domain expands outside the Gojo barrier, the outside becomes vulnerable to attacks from the outside. It is at this point that the Gojo barrier begins to crack until it is completely broken by the Sukuna's domain attacks. After that, we see the Sukuna in a superior position to the Gojo already sending that sadistic little smile. Without the unlimited, Gojo then receives his first attack. Of all places, his neck was the first to be hit by the Sukuna's cuts. Gojo feels the attack and puts his hand to his neck. While everyone is stunned by this damage, which could be fatal, here the Gojo begins to heal itself using reverse energy. But within the limits of the Sukuna's expansion it's useless, he'll keep getting hit as long as he's in that space. Students and teachers comment that it should be easy for the Gojo to escape. But they are reminded that after using his domain expansion, Gojo can't use his techniques for a long time. So now he'll have to hold out, without dying, until he can activate his techniques once more. While the Gojo is cut all over his body in all directions in a bloodbath, the Sukuna continues to laugh. But the Gojo is still doing well, because when it comes to the efficiency of cursed techniques, it's still the best. In an instant, the Gojo disappears, but the Sukuna realizes that he would try to escape, so he chases him. He throws a kick at Gojo, who defends himself. Gojo tries to land a punch, but Sukuna dodges and scissors him. Gojo continues trying to land a punch with cursed energy, but the Sukuna dodges. After this he takes distance from Gojo and then the two begin to face each other while Sukuna realizes that Gojo moves very well even while using reverse energy, and Gojo realizes that the center of the domain's attacks is not Sukuna, but the shrine itself. Here the viewers debate the physical form of the shrine and what would happen if the Gojo destroyed it. But while everyone thinks that the Gojo is in trouble, he launches the new shadow style, Simple Domination. Here Gojo creates a sort of room to protect himself from the shrine's guaranteed hit, and even if he can't teach himself how to do a simple domain, it doesn't mean he doesn't know. After all, he's a genius. It's amazing how Gojo manages to use both the reverse technique and a simple domain while recovering from having used his domain expansion. But against a technique like the shrine, that won't take long, not least because Sukuna wouldn't stand still. He ends up invading this simple domain to attack the Gojo with his own fists. The Sukuna tries to land another punch on the Gojo, but he dodges and already appears inside the Sukuna's guard. But before he can do anything, his technique stops and he ends up being cut once again. But then he uses Simple Mastery a second time, and as much as Sukuna thinks it's a waste of time and the spectators are in doubt as to why he's doing it, the Gojo continues to attack while everyone notices that it has stopped healing. They wonder why this has happened, since the Gojo's cursed energy doesn't run out. Only here he's consuming twice as much energy just to heal himself and he's still using a simple domain. Even so, Gojo continues to defend himself and attack. When everyone wonders if Gojo is really going to lose, or if there is even a possibility, Gojo climbs onto Sukuna and grabs him tightly. Here the shrine cuts stop and Gojo can use his cursed technique reversal. Still leaning on the Sukuna, he makes a handgun as if to launch an attack. Here the spectators understand that he has stopped healing in order to recover his cursed technique which was exhausted, all by using the reverse curse technique. With a sadistic laugh, Gojo launches a red-hot attack on Sukuna, throwing him towards the shrine. After the impact we can see that the Gojo's attack has hit Sukuna's head and destroyed part of the shrine while the Gojo heals himself once again and declares that it's been very tiring. Here Yuta explains that it shouldn't be possible to restore an exhausted cursed technique. It would be like cooling down a component in an engine that has overheated, as it needs time to cool down. But the Gojo is doing something unbelievable and that's why he's still standing in the battle. The Gojo sneers at Sukuna and exclaims that he can still go further. It can't be that the strongest curse only has this to show for it. When the Sukuna expands the reach of his domain, The Gojo doesn't back down and uses his domain expansion once more, even at the risk of his barrier being destroyed again. As the domains collide once again, everyone exclaims about how the Gojo isn't an idiot to do this so thoughtlessly. But soon they realize that Gojo has reversed the internal and external resistances of his barrier, making it resistant to external blows, so Gojo himself calls the second round. Inside the domain, the two begin to fight. Gojo starts with a kick that Sukuna defends. Then we have a frank exchange between the two and finally Gojo ends up being hit by some attacks. He realizes that even within the expanded domain, Sukuna can use domain amplification. But at the same time he can't use his innate techniques, so Gojo goes on the attack, throwing a punch that Sukuna dodges, after which Gojo dodges his punches and hits one right in the King of Curse's ribs. After this, Gojo notices something strange as Sukuna stands coast to coast with him. Sukuna also modified the specifications of his domain and disabled the guaranteed hit of his expansion. The Sukuna has realized that the Gojo and those in contact with it are unaffected by the immeasurable void. While he is free of the guaranteed hit, he takes advantage of the binding pact he made by cancelling his guaranteed hit to further increase the strength of his attacks outside the Gojo's barrier to destroy the Gojo's domain for the second time. Now it's Sukuna's turn to sneer at Gojo as he's hit by the guaranteed hit of his domain expansion. But here Sukuna notices that something is different, his cuts are being too shallow. The Gojo says he hasn't used this since he was young when he learned his domain expansion. This technique is the emotion of the decaying petal, a secret anti-bending technique of the three families. A technique designed to repel any attack with cursed energy directed at the user. And although it doesn't work on complex techniques, it does work on simple techniques like Sukuna cuts. What's more, it won't fall apart like simple mastery, but it's not 100% effective either. Gojo did this just to have time to recover his energy to send out another domain expansion. Only this time he's changed the specification so that it's gigantic and swallows up all of Sukuna's expansion, even if it becomes weak internally. But Gojo doesn't stop there. After increasing the extent of its expansion, it gradually begins to shrink until it becomes a tiny barrier. With such a small barrier, theoretically its strength will increase. Gojo learned this method while spending time in the prison realm. This allowed him to visualize the shape of his expansion in an extremely smaller volume. Even so, Kyusuke, who has become the know-it-all of this fight, says that he doesn't understand how Gojo can keep changing the specifications of his barrier. Normally there is a standard for all users, both in external and internal form and in conjuration speed and volume. Each wizard has a unique and specific combination for his own expansion. Meanwhile, the battle continues inside the barrier, and we can understand why Gojo created a giant barrier. It would have been easier to gradually make it smaller and smaller, but also why he wanted to try to cover the shrine. The barrier starts to become unstable to the point of being broken. All this because Sukuna has also reduced the range of his expansion to maximize the release of his curse technique. So if the Gojo barrier is destroyed, he'll be in a worse situation than he already was. When the barrier finally breaks, we can see a Gojo standing in front of Sukuna who has received an attack to the chest. To everyone's amazement, the malevolent shrine was also destroyed, as was the Gojo barrier. Here we can see that inside the barrier the Gojo had the upper hand and hit the Sukuna in the chest, who is now laughing while spitting blood. Even though Sukuna destroyed Gojo's barrier from the outside, Gojo did so much damage to him on the inside that he was unable to maintain his hold. According to Mei, this battle of domains lasted 3 minutes. Everyone is thinking about how they can't use their techniques for a while, but Gojo would theoretically have the advantage because he uses the reverse technique on his innate technique. But Sukuna is also a prodigy who learns things on the fly. With the help of the Kenjaku, he divided his soul into 20 cursed objects. After that, he managed to do it on his own to enter Megumi's body. Now that Gojo has shown how to do it, being Sukuna, he may be able to reverse his exhausted technique. Outside the barrier, the two start running in pursuit. The Sukuna wants to buy time to restore his technique, but the Gojo won't give up and chases him while destroying everything in front of him. When he appears in front of Sukuna, he throws a kick that Sukuna blocks with his arms. When he's thrown a bit away, Gojo wonders why Sukuna is limiting himself to using his expansion and extending his domain, which ended up giving Gojo an advantage in those 3 minutes inside the barrier. He wonders why Sukuna isn't also using Megumi's 10 Shadows technique, and if he's afraid of Gojo destroying Maharaga with a single blow. But at that moment we can catch a glimpse of Maharaga's rudder spinning while Gojo gets serious and blood starts dripping from his nose. This shows that he may be reaching his limit, or may have already gone too far with his techniques. While Sukuna seems to be getting ahead of his techniques by using Maharaga's ability. After that, Gojo simply wipes his nose while using his domain expansion once again. But Sukuna doesn't lag behind and hits back with his expansion. With the clash between the two domains, we see that they were launched at the same time. This confirms that Sukuna can also use reverse energy to heal his exhausted technique. Two things can happen here: either Sukuna breaks through the Gojo's barrier from the outside, or the Gojo inflicts enough damage that Sukuna can no longer maintain his hold. But if any enemy is caught in the immeasurable void, even for a few seconds, they will be paralyzed. So if the Gojo manages to destroy the malevolent shrine, he wins. Inside the barrier, Gojo throws a series of punches at Sukuna, who defends himself. Then he appears behind him and uses his gravity to pull Sukuna with absurd force. The King of Curses is thrown all the way into his shrine, but it doesn't end there. Gojo pulls him in once more and punches him in the stomach, but Sukuna manages to defend himself against this attack. With a sadistic expression, the two face each other, but then their expanses of dominance are destroyed at the same time. They are both thrown away and we can see that the Sukuna took more damage while they were inside the barrier. To everyone's amazement, Gojo shows superiority inside the barrier, so he has a chance of winning. Gojo throws a punch that knocks Sukuna into a pillar. Here they expand their domains once again. But Yuta notices something different. It may have just been you, but for the first time Gojo expanded his domain half a second before Sukuna. That's because Sukuna used reverse energy to heal his body, so it took him a while to react, not even 0.01 seconds, but he was hit by the immeasurable void. Then the Gojo pierces his heart with one blow. With this damage, Sukuna was unable to maintain his malevolent shrine, which was eventually destroyed. From this we can see that Sukuna is still paralyzed by the immeasurable void, so the Gojo plans to destroy his lungs and liver so that he is in a state almost on the verge of death. But to the Gojo's astonishment, this attack is interrupted by the invocation of the Divine General Silas Maharaga. Even with this summoning, Gojo plans to destroy him before he adapts to his immeasurable emptiness, so he uses reversal to heal his technique. But before he does, Maharaga attacks his barrier and ends up destroying it completely. Gojo is astonished by this giant monster in front of him and wonders how it can already be adapted to his immeasurable void if it has only just been summoned. With the Gojo's barrier broken, the Sukuna comes back to its senses. Then we can see the colossal size of the Maharaga next to Megumi's body. We can see that this wasn't the first time Sukuna had done this. In his fight against Yorozu he also adapted without summoning the full Maharaga. Using his 6 eyes, Gojo realizes that Sukuna has transferred all the damage of the guaranteed hit from his immeasurable void to Megumi's soul. We can even see the Maharaga's helm next to it. Sukuna returns Maharaga to the shadows and then the two of them go back to teasing each other about who is more desperate to win. Here Sukuna recognizes that Gojo's immeasurable emptiness is a problem, which is why he had to deal with it first. But Gojo knows that it's Megumi who's adapted, not Sukuna, so if he expands his dominance one more time Sukuna will have to resort to summoning Maharaga. When Gojo signals that he's going to expand his domain again with the intention of defeating Maharaga with one shot, he feels a shock in his head, then Sukuna laughs at the fact that he can no longer expand his domain. Here, blood starts coming out of the Gojo's nose to the amazement of everyone watching the duel. But Gojo simply wipes his nose while Sukuna explains that what he's been doing all this time is destroying and rebuilding part of his brain where his innate techniques are recorded, so he can use them as new ones, except that even by doing this Gojo has overstepped his boundaries. Since Sukuna has done it fewer times than Gojo, he can still expand his domain, and even if Gojo manages to expand, he will still lose in the contest with Sukuna. So, the King of Curses will expand his domain closed so that the Gojo has no way of escaping. He makes the signs of his expansion while the Maharaga's helm is on his back. While the Gojo is on his knees, Sukuna begins to mock him for being the strongest at a time when he didn't exist. Here the Gojo was about to be defeated and killed. But when the Sukuna expands its domain, it ends up destroying itself, to the amazement and relief of everyone watching. When we look at Sukuna, we see that he is in a worse state than Gojo, as blood comes out of his nose and eyes. Even for less than 10 seconds he was hit by the immeasurable void. The damage to his brain was enough to make him unable to expand his domain once again. It's Gojo's turn to mock Sukuna, asking him if he likes it. He then points to the Meimei crows and says that his students are watching. Then we see the look on all their faces as Gojo declares that he's going to have to show off a bit more. The Sukuna laughs sadistically. Gojo pulls Sukuna up with his gravity to throw an absurd punch right at his face. We then see their expressions as we are reminded of Yorozu's phrase about the strongest being alone, which reminds us of the gift she gave Sukuna. After that, Kyusuke gives a short explanation of how the Gojo's physical blows work. He uses blue in addition to strengthening with cursed energy in one blow. This gives the impression of having received a counterstrike. Yuta and Hikari received such a blow and ended up vomiting. Then we see Gojo dragging Sukuna through the city while destroying everything in front of him. Without giving him a chance to recover, the Gojo uses its gravity to gather the various pieces of debris around Sukuna as if it were Naruto's Shirbaku Tensei. When Sukuna comes out of his prison, Gojo is already waiting with a kick that the King of Curses easily dodges. But before he can gloat, another kick comes from above, but he dodges that attack too. When he tries to attack, Gojo simply goes all Naruto on him and creates clones that surround him. Sukuna realizes that these are afterimages, so when Gojo attacks he defends himself against the real thing. He grabs Gojo's fist, then hits back with another punch that Gojo can only use as a barrier. Gojo is sent flying but ends up grabbing hold and stopping at a traffic light. From a distance the two of them stare at each other, while we can't see all of Sukuna's expression at the moment. As he laughs, the Maharaga's will turns for the first time, but the Gojo realizes that Sukuna is using domain amplification to defend himself, and when this happens the Maharaga's will goes dark, which means that, at this moment, he isn't adapting. When the signal opens, the Gojo passes through Sukuna like a bolt of lightning. Not only that, but he closes his fist with gravity as if he were preparing a punch. But in fact he used his power to attract the traffic light, and thereby hit Sukuna. But the King of Curses not only notices, he strikes back, throwing him against Gojo. The Gojo manages to dodge, but the Sukuna quickly appears behind him. Here the Gojo says he needs 4 turns to adapt to his technique, which means there are still 3 turns to go. Only after that will the Maharaga adapt to his infinity. Sukuna says that this is the countdown to wiping the smile off Gojo's face. But then he breaks into a wide grin, saying it's the same thing Sukuna was doing. He also declares that he's going to kill Sukuna before the 3 rotations are up. This makes everyone wonder if he's forgotten about Megumi, but according to Hajime no one cares. After that, the Gojo starts chasing Sukuna, while the Maharaga's rudder turns for the second time. If the Gojo doesn't hurry, his technique will be assimilated. With his fists embedded with blue energy, the Gojo chases the Sukuna, until he lands a punch with his blue and knocks the King of Curses through a pillar. The Gojo continues and uses his blue to create several orbs of energy around the Sukuna. When he starts, the orbs start destroying everything in front of them while chasing the Sukuna everywhere. But this was just a distraction for Gojo to appear behind him. While Gojo attacks with an elbow, Sukuna hits back with a kick. But Gojo manages to throw him away with a kick. Here the Maharaga's rudder turns for the 3rd time, which means there's one more turn to go before Gojo is in trouble. Even so, the Gojo continues to press and attack the Sukuna. He thinks that the King of Fallacies is just waiting for his blue, so he uses something unexpected. Using the reversal technique, Gojo points his fingers at Sukuna and throws his red almost at point-blank range. But before he was hit, Sukuna used his amplification to tank the attack. So even though he took damage, it was minimal. While Sukuna ponders that his amplification can only reduce the damage but not block it, Gojo quickly appears behind him. Sukuna even jokes about the Gojo being desperate. But to his amazement, the Gojo's red hasn't disappeared yet. Then Sukuna is hit from behind and takes all the damage. He used the geography of the building to make his red turn around and hit Sukuna from behind. This was the opening. Gojo wanted to hit him with an absurd punch using a well-known technique, the Black Flash. To everyone's amazement, not only did Gojo know how to use this technique, he ended up blacking out Sukuna for good with it. His eyes turned completely white. At that moment, the Sukuna remains motionless while the Maharaga's rudder falls. But in that fall, he ends up taking the last turn he needs to adapt. With that, the Gojo realizes that it has fallen into a trap, and begins to be sucked in by the Sukuna's shadow. Not only that, but the Maharaga's gigantic hands begin to appear to the dismay of all his students. Without joking, Maharaga launches his attack, slashing Gojo's chest, while we see his expression of, "I got him." As we see the result of Maharaga's blow, the students watching tense up, but Itadori still thinks Gojo can win. Shoko retorts that it's not that easy. She knows that Gojo can still use reverse energy because he used red, but his release of cursed energy is too low. Even so, it never crossed anyone's mind, even Gojo's, that he could be defeated, even against the King of Curses. This feeling reminded him of another time when he was pushed to the limit, in his fight against Toji Fushiguro. But the greater the signs of defeat, the greater the satisfaction. Gojo then attacks Maharaga and lands a series of punches to his face. Then he hits the creature in the stomach, which is thrown away with force. The Maharaga takes the damage and gurgles, then Gojo starts chanting his curse technique to increase his energy release. Just as he was about to throw his red one more time, the Sukuna interrupts with a rain of rabbits, which ends up hiding the Maharaga. While pointing his finger at the shadow, the Gojo takes a wave from the Sukuna having woken up from his beauty sleep after that black flash. When he throws his red, it destroys the building they were in. After that we only see Gojo running after Sukuna and Maharaga as he understands that Sukuna is going to protect Shikigami while he undoes his unlimited. Sukuna throws a fire extinguisher to block Gojo's vision. But he sees clearly with his 6 eyes as Maharaga comes over the top. Sukuna does the piercing blood stance, and throws a water shot from the Elephant Max. As Gojo protects himself from Maharaga's attack, his Limitless is deactivated. As a result, Sukuna's water shot hits Gojo's real body. He still has to dodge Sukuna's attacks. Gojo realizes that Sukuna is not just a support, he will attack when his technique is defeated. But he also realizes that this battle is 2-1, and that Sukuna's ability to use several techniques at the same time is just as great as his. Since Sukuna has decided to expand his arsenal with the 10 Shadows technique, Gojo realizes that Mahoraga will take much longer to adapt to red than he did to blue. But that's still better than him having adapted to all his techniques. But Sukuna tells him not to think it's a simple 2-to-1, it's actually 3-to-1, as he invokes the new totality. This new Shikigami is the Chimera Beast, Repulsive Jaw. So now his team is formed, we have a 3 against 1. But Gojo still makes a joke by saying that he looks like an ET or a child in the middle of these two giants. After that, the two shadows go at Gojo with all their might, but he dodges. From the shadow behind him, Sukuna appears, readying his water shot. But the Gojo not only manages to dodge, he turns and strikes back with a punch that smashes the ground. After that, Mahoraga and Nu go at Gojo again, but he continues to dodge. He appears behind Mahoraga's back, already preparing his cursed technique. He then launches his red flare towards the shadows. Mahoraga turns around angrily, and the Gojo realizes that it was effective, but just barely. He wonders if his adaptation is gradual, that is, he becomes more resistant over time, rather than one moment not being resistant at all and the next being totally resistant. Then he realizes that to finish him off, he'll have to use one of his techniques of unrestricted emptiness, a technique that carries great risks. Seeing that Gojo is at a disadvantage, Yuta decides to go and help so that he can at least deal with the Shikigami. But this sparks an argument about who should go there, since we have Hajime in the queue, and Maki herself says she should go. But they come to the conclusion that it's better not to get involved yet because Sukuna may have something in store waiting for this attack, and anyone else would only limit the Gojo, and this is his battle and no one else's. Meanwhile, the city continues to be destroyed, while Sukuna's two Shikigamis go all out on Gojo. He dodges their attack, then hits a black flash that destroys the Chimera's belly, but it heals quickly, then attacks with its tail, which the Gojo rips off as if it were nothing. While the creature heals, the Gojo realizes that the Nu has been fed on the snake, tiger and deer, and even if it hasn't adapted to the unlimited, it has to be destroyed with a single blow. Mahoraga takes the opportunity to throw several boulders at Gojo, but they are stopped by the Mugen and don't hit him. While Gojo laughs, Mahoraga attacks from above, but he easily dodges this attack. He then throws a two-handed punch at the Shikigami who is thrown away. Agito takes advantage and goes after Gojo, but he doesn't get past the Mugen and the Gojo punches him away. The recovered Mahoraga appears behind him. Gojo says that Sukuna is being predictable, but Sukuna is fine hiding in the shadows. He knows that if he's hit now by a 100% purple, he'll die instantly. While the Shikigami continue to attack Gojo, Sukuna complains that Mahoraga isn't fighting with everything. He orders him to show what he can do. Here his rudder turns once again. Then on the next page, we have Gojo with his arm blown off after an attack by Mahoraga. An attack so absurd that it severed not only his arm but also the building behind him. While Sukuna praises this feat, the spectators don't believe that Mahoraga used a Sukuna technique. So the Shikigami go after the Gojo once again. With the Gojo weakened, Sukuna appears from the shadows to apply pressure. He pokes Gojo in the face and he's thrown straight into the Agito. He even tries to punch the Gojo, but his attack can't get past the Mugen. As he presses in, Gojo laughs while looking at him as he creates a blue sphere in his hand. Then he sinks his fist with the maximum release of blue into the chest of the bleeding Gojo. Not only that, but he is totally enveloped by the Gojo's maximum blue as he is thrown towards the Sukuna. This blue is so absurd that it destroys everything in front of it and puts an end to the Agito, which ends up being completely compressed inside it until it is completely destroyed. According to the narrator's words, 41 seconds later the Gojo had left its mark on Shinjuku with its purple void once again. Meanwhile we see the result of the blue Gojo exploding, while he rebuilds his arm with reverse energy. Sukuna vs Gojo finally ended with an electrifying finale. Here the strongest sorcerers faced each other and showed why they are the pinnacle of power in the Jujutsu world, and if you want to know how this battle ended, follow. Hey GLR, my name is Lucas, and this is the second part of the Gojo vs Sukuna battle. To watch the first part the link is on the card above, run there 3 then come back here. Like it now. After that, we see the Chimera being completely destroyed by the blue, while Gojo appears next to Sukuna and Mahoraga. The narrator says that after the first black flash, Gojo felt a wave of excitement, while, for the first time in 1,000 years, the King of Curses Ryaman Sukuna felt nervous. In an instant, Gojo appears and punches Mahoraga. Sukuna is startled, but then Gojo quickly appears in front of him. When Sukuna attacks, Gojo grabs his arm, spins him around and then throws him towards Mahoraga, who cushions the impact of his fall. Gojo continues and attacks Sukuna with another black flash, but Mahoraga protects him with both hands. Then they are both thrown into the building they are in. Here the Gojo starts chanting his cursed reversal technique. Then Sukuna realizes the trigger for the attack and thinks about getting Sukuna hit to adapt faster. But when the Gojo points its red upwards, Sukuna immediately understands and shouts for Mahoraga to run after the attack. Soon the Shikigami was jumping floor by floor until he reached the Gojo's blue, which was also active. All he could think about was fulfilling the order to stop the purple one, so he attacked the blue one because he was already adapted. But the Gojo used the blue's attraction feature to get to it before the Maharaga, since it was completely adapted. So he prepares his attack and launches an absurd punch that throws the Shikigami against the wall. But Sukuna, for his part, was preparing his attack of water as piercing blood to explode the red one. Gojo rushes to try to stop his attack, but the piercing attack had already been launched. But before the Sukuna can gloat, the Gojo chants his red one more time. So even if the attack hits the red full on, because it's already reinforced, it doesn't even tickle. Now Gojo chants his purple void chant near Sukuna and Maharaga. Then he finally launches his purple void technique. With a sadistic look on his face towards the two enemies. Here, the purple Gojo explodes indiscriminately over a large part of Shinjuku, taking everything in a gigantic radius of destruction. We can even see the detail of the Maharaga's rudder being destroyed. After the explosion, we see Sukuna, who has survived all this power, in the dust. Who appears in front of him after that is Satoru Gojo himself, who has also been hit. He's kind of destroyed himself, but since it's his energy, it's affected his body in a different way. Here the Gojo has recovered his reverse energy release with the black flash. Faced with a destroyed Sukuna, with little healing, without the Mahorga, and without domain amplification. All these parameters made Kusakabe and the others think that Satoru Gojo had won, but the reality tended to be very disappointing. A young Gojo meets his best friend Geto, who is also young. Sitting side by side like in the old days, they talk about death, and how a wizard always dies alone. Gojo still remembers things he's left to sort out, but lets it go. Then when he's asked what the King of Curses is like, he answers truthfully that the guy is strong. Besides, he didn't fight with full power. Gojo wonders if he would win even if he didn't have the 10 shadows. But at least now he can empathize with the loneliness of a loner. He gave everything to this battle, his body, refined techniques, keen sense, drive, idea of preparation and improvisations. He wanted to transmit all this to the Sukuna, and receive it back. But at least he had fun. He's glad it wasn't time or illness that took his life, but someone stronger than him. Since that was always his spirit, he never fought for money or to save anyone, but because he simply wanted to use his power to satisfy himself. There, a young Gojo finds his old friends dead, so he hopes it's true that there's no such thing as an unrepentant death for sorcerers. Back in the present, we see a Gojo lying on the ground with only his upper body. What happened after his unrestricted purple void was that, after Sukuna had been beaten on purpose for the entire fight, the time had come for Maharaga's adaptation to be adjusted to himself. Then Maharaga's adaptation became so refined that his target was no longer the Gojo but space itself. So he went and cut it, so even though the Gojo is immune it's still part of that space, so when the space was cut the Gojo was cut in half too. With a satisfied look on his face after a great duel, Sukuna declares that that was splendid. And that as long as he lives, he will never forget Satoru Gojo. Gojo laughs as he loses his life. Here ends the greatest Jujutsu Kaisen battle, one in which the moral victor was the greatest sorcerer of our time. But the final winner was the strongest sorcerer who ever lived, since the winner is the one who lives on. But comment below on what you thought of the battle and the ending.